check this out. This tansy survived my radar. And now these cinnabar moth larvae are feeding off of it. So that makes me want to keep it. It's not at risk of flowering right now. You can see all the frass that's on it. So over here, next to my volunteer blackcap, is this volunteer parsnip. That's how the root looks right now. This one. So this is what I love to see, is volunteer root crops in the landscape. Okay, so this is the area high in the food forest where I put my fava beans and my earliest lettuce. There's also a bunch of flowers in here, as you can see. So bachelor buttons. But it is finally time to harvest my fava beans. I took some video a few weeks ago. I will show some footage of that. But these fava beans were too small for me to harvest. And so I checked on them the other day and they finally look really plump. I don't know how long they've been plump like this, but it hasn't been more than a few weeks. So I am going to finally be harvesting fava beans. And what legumes do, they do fix nitrogen, but they don't release nitrogen until they're dead. So I am going to cut them at the roots, leave the roots in, and they should supply the surrounding plants with nitrogen after I cut them back. But you'll see that there's the lettuce in here have bolted. The red lettuces were a bit behind. Also the radishes that volunteer in the landscape, or daikons, they're on the periphery and they've fallen over. And so I'm also going to cut this back so we can see what's in here a bit better. Okay, so it looks substantially different after just removing fava beans and radish seeds. So for now, I placed all these radish seeds in this pile. I don't know if you can see that. But I will be moving this around the property, anywhere where I'm not going to be covering the ground because of my bindweed issue. I'm going to lay these out for volunteering. I assume they're far enough along that they can ripen in place and still be viable. The fava beans are just insane. I try to shove them all in this bucket, but they're all like hanging out. But look how massive. I don't even know if this is like too massive. Here's one. So, July and harvesting the fava beans. By comparison, let's see what regular beans look like. So first off, beans I plant pretty late because they don't like cold temperatures. Second, I tend to think that because they get their own nitrogen, I can just place them anywhere. I don't have to coddle them. But what's happened, and maybe I'll be able to show one or two later in this video, is when I put them in wood chips, they get taken down by slugs. And this is the group that made it into my Hugo mound or hugelkultur. The one that was next to this sheep sorrel that I left here, you can see the slug damage. And so this is how they looked kind of out in the wood chip area. And maybe because the slugs were hiding in the sorrel or something, this got taken out. Or maybe it just didn't get enough sun, so it didn't have the ability to protect itself against slugs. But here, they're doing okay. I think it's still not huge. And these are, I think they're all bush beans, so I don't need to stake them. And they're still not crazy along. I mean, you could still just see the flowers. And there's a whole bunch of varieties in here. Like this looks like green, these look purple. There's some more purple ones here. So this kind of shows the temperature that I'm working with. Even though I planted these as soon as I could, probably at the beginning of June. Even when they survive, this is as big as they can get. I'm not fertilizing really this year, so that could be part of it. This is just wood and topsoil, and then whatever I had, like coffee grounds. I think this is coffee grounds out here. It wouldn't be very interesting to make YouTube videos of me throwing a bunch of fertilizer on plants and being, ooh, look how big they are. This is kind of more exciting to see what can I grow. This is also where I planted some really old squash seeds. I wasn't really expecting to germinate, just because I needed to get rid of them. The ones that didn't get eaten by critters. You can see, this is how they look. Right, and so some were bigger than others. And for water, they're expected to tap into the logs underneath, so I'm not doing anything with these guys. They're gonna have to, these are all gonna have to fend for themselves. There's people that bring in compost and all that. You really should. And then you can see some daikons volunteered in here, just like they volunteer everywhere. Yeah, so I don't know what these squashes are exactly. It's a mix. You can see in here's like a little guy, so he's not gonna ever become anything. If you plant a whole bunch, you expect maybe 80% to get eaten, and then just the perfect amount end up sticking around and germinating. Because aside from the fertilization issues, I mean, they're spaced quite nicely apart. Like, you would think I planned for this, but I did not thin these. This is just what came up on its own after surviving critter munching. And I have been pulling out these wild lettuces. I guess that is a kind of maintenance, so they don't compete for water. I probably wouldn't have stuck more than 2 right in this mound, and 2 of them survived. But these were all planted or seeded very close together. And also there's this checker mallow that I didn't pull out. Because he just volunteers everywhere too. There's some volunteer brassicas I got in here. I got to do some weeding all around it, obviously. I haven't gotten to cleaning this up yet beyond this point. But the stuff that I did do, I think it's holding up well. As I can add more fertility to keep planting kind of in this method. What else do we see in here? I'm not going to harvest these now, but I have these I'm going to harvest, these red lettuces, and this massive oak leaf lettuce. I can shave that as well, so there's still a little bit harvest of the lettuce left. These celery, they bolted, so that's not good, except for providing seed for volunteer celery in the future. So we can see if it's gonna work like parsnip and seed itself in the future. This one's has not bolted. This could be a result of stressing them out because I move them around as transplants. This one hasn't bolted, but I really should be watering them more, so they're probably water stressed as well as possibly heat stressed. But this is a kind of common theme that you'll see later or elsewhere in my garden beds, is that some plants are bolting early and some are not. And there are onions that are still in here and they haven't been getting a lot of sun. So now I've opened it up so there's more sunlight coming to these onions. I also know that there's rutabaga in here somewhere, and I guess I will find them later. You know, I'm gonna let these go to seed and self-sow in the future. So that's not gonna do much for opening up the sun, but I think I'm happy with what's going on in here. There's also some sunflowers in there. This is what the arugula seeds look like. I'm real tired of the wild arugula sowing it, self-sowing. There's only so much of that wild rocket that I want. There's also these scapes. I thought I was actually late to be harvesting scapes, but these are much later here. It's amazing the different rates at which things mature and bolt. Like elsewhere, my garlic it's already like dead or died back and ready to harvest. And here, it's like these scapes look like I could still harvest them. So I'm not gonna do that now, but when I come back and collect some lettuce, I'll grab these scapes. Okay, these are my fava beans from just a few plants. Pretty happy about that, especially since I thought these were dug up by critters when I sowed them. Let's see what they look like. Looks like This is one of my few trees that's going to be giving me fruit. It also shows how later things happen in the season here than in other places. This is a mulberry tree. And so just now my mulberries are ripening. You see most of them are still not ripe. Oh man, those are good. It took many years for this tree to get this big and bear fruit. And it has a sister tree that's on the other end of this row. And it is still not fruiting. It's also shorter than this. Here, mulberry season is just starting for me at the end of July. As you guys were so eagerly awaiting, this is how the beans look planted in wood chips. To be fair, these aren't getting much light because they're underneath this meadow sweet and lupin and parsnip seeds. But it doesn't exactly stretch like other plants can do. Here's one of my stumps. And here is a bean that's doing quite well. And this one's getting full sun. And he's even climbing the stump. He's wrapped himself around the salal right there. This looks like it's a pole bean though. That makes sense that I would put a pole bean here so it can climb up here. Here's another one. It's not doing as well. The pole beans, they know how to stretch, but it's still an area of full sun. Even these salal can be harvested. You see that mostly not ripe, like the mulberries.